Hello everyone, and welcome to the Thoughtcast series. We are now in episode 5 right now, and this is really an awesome edition because it's Oops, I Win time with Nathan Lipetz and Faultedform. We are talking about Oops All Spells, my favorite weapon of choice for the last half a year, and probably for basically the whole Magic existence for both our guests. So, Nathan, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. I'm doing quite well. Just a normal morning.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we have a pretty huge time difference right now. I think it's about 9 hours because you're based in Vancouver.
Canada, yeah. Yeah, I'm from Canada. I'm moving to Germany soon though, so I'm pretty excited about that. And we'll be on the same time zone, which will be cool and nearby.
Yeah, nearby for North American standards, because I think it's still 8 hours by car, and that's pretty
something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty a long drive for Europeans. But for North Americans, it's like, well, I do this in each weekend or something like that.
Yeah, basically.
So, tell us something about yourself. How did you find your way to Oops All Spells, and most importantly, how long are you playing Legacy at first?
Yeah, so I started Magic in 2015, around Magic Origins Battle for Zendikar time. I was mostly playing Modern at the time, but like just casual for a while, and then played Modern basically. My first Legacy deck was D&T. Oops was actually the 5th deck I had built in paper. So I went through a lot of decks before getting to Oops All Spells. My first deck that I did well with was Nettle Elves in 2020, I would say. I top 8 at a Legacy Challenge. It was actually my first Legacy Challenge I ever played, I think. And that was a lot of fun. So yeah, I've been through most of Legacy. I've played pretty much everything, I would say, over the years. Magic Online's been really helpful for that because I can just play what I want when I want. And I used to stream a lot, so I was getting a lot of deck requests and people just telling me to play the most random shit you could imagine, and that was pretty fun. So the decks I've struggled with in the past, though, have been like Storm, Lands, and Painter has been a very difficult deck for me to learn. But beyond that, I have a lot of experience with various combo decks and Delver and Moonstompy and just a wide variety of decks. So yeah, Oops was not the first deck I picked up. It was much later, I would say, in my Magic time. I mean, 2 years into Legacy, but yeah.
Yeah, but you're pretty well known in the whole Legacy community for being one of the leading powers or leading forces of evolution in the Oops All Spells.
Yeah, so
archetype.
we started working on Oops in 2021, me and Faulted and a few others at the time. It was very small. Like, we started this Discord, there was like 5 or 7 of us or something like that, and there's now 600 players, which is absolutely crazy to me. I never thought that Discord was going to get over 100 people. Like, as soon as it hit 300, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, we are such a fringe deck and this is crazy. And now it's double that, which is amazing. But yeah, we did a lot of work on it over the years. There hasn't been a huge ton of a development until quite recently, when there was a massive amount of development, but there was a bunch in the beginning and then a few years off and then a bunch now. So it's kind of exploding again with the resurgence of the new MDFCs and just like people trying it and getting results now. So there's a lot of development there. We can talk about more of it later in the episode, I think. But yeah, the last thing I wanted to say is how I got into Oops originally was I was playing Doomsday and Omnitel at the time, but I was losing to Delver too much, and I looked at this faster combo deck and I was like, well, if I don't have to sit around getting bolted to death and just win on turn 1, maybe I can beat Delver. And Doomsday at the time was like very consistently 30% versus Delver, and me and Faulted made Oops more consistent, and after developing it, we got to like a 52% win rate versus Delver, and that felt like a big accomplishment for combo at the time because everything was losing to Delver that was combo. So like being at all like anywhere close to 50% versus the blue deck was of the format was great.
It's always the same, I think. If your Legacy deck simply can't beat Delver, that's basically a litmus test, then it's simply not good enough for the format.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where it began. I was playing Doomsday at the time and dying on repeat.
Awesome. So I think the first Oops decks were winning with Angel of Glory's Rise.
Yeah, that was way before my time, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was the first Oops decks came out of Standard, or the idea was the Ravnica Allegiance, or I'm not sure where Baldur's Gate 5 was first printed.
Gate Crash, 2013.
Oh, okay, Gate Crash. Yeah, I'm an old Legacy player, so
yeah.
Everything just gets kind of blurry for me with these set releases.
Yeah, so Oops was started around 2013 with those cards being released in Great Gate Crash, Balustrade Spy, and what's the other one called? Undercity Informer. I always forget the two, but yeah. So those two came out, and the deck. I don't know a huge ton about the development of it back then, but I think probably what you were saying, like out of Standard, is likely what happened. I really don't know. I'm not the best person to ask about this history, but yeah, it played Angel of Glory Rise mostly because Thassa's Oracle wasn't a thing, and so the combo back then had like, I think it was like a 5 or 6 card package, and now we just have Dread Return Oracle, which is a lot more simple. But back then it was, from my understanding, pretty fringe. If you go look at results, there was like maybe 3 or 4 results per year of the deck until about 2020. So yeah, that's what I know about the history. I don't know a huge ton, but there isn't a lot of results for it.
Yeah, it was like you said, it was really a glass cannon. Mm-hmm. It lost to Force of Will most of the time. Mm-hmm. So it was a meme deck, to be honest.
Yeah.
But with the printing of Thassa's Oracle, the deck had a huge first...
And the new lands.
Yeah, also the MDFCs.
It was the same year, so yeah. It gave the deck consistency, basically. Consistency, and your package for your combo was smaller, which meant you could play the more consistency and more fast mana and just be like more protected and all that good stuff. Everything you want in a combo deck.
Oh yeah. So that's about the history. We know now that Thassa's Oracle is the main win condition of the deck. I mean, there are other ways that you can win, like with combat damage, which also happens a lot of the time, actually.
More than you'd think, yes.
Yeah, the fair plan is not to underestimate here. But what I really want to know is, why should anyone play the deck? Because I hear a lot of people are telling me, why should I play something like that? It's boring, it's repetitive, it always does the same, it loses to Force of Will, you lose to all the graveyard hate. Why should I play something like that? Why don't you play something real Magic?
Yeah, so I hear that a lot.
That's the thing too. I always hear.
I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of moans and groans when you beat them with it too, because people think it's just a shit deck that dies to everything. So when you beat them, they're like, "Oh, damn!" Like they're really pissed off. They're like, "You're not playing real Magic" or some nonsense like that. And honestly, for me, I've enjoyed the deck. I got into it originally again as a competitive option. It was never for me a budget option. It was always, I think this deck is good. I want to play this deck because I can win with it. And that's always my policy with playing decks. I'm a competitive player generally. I don't build decks that are on budget. My budget online is unlimited because I play online. In paper, I owned a playset of City of Traders and some dual lands back then. It wasn't like I was building Oops for a budget option, but it's nice that it does cost very little. Yeah, why play why play Oops? Oops is very fun. I actually just enjoy it a lot. The play patterns can be repetitive, but a lot of games just look very different almost every game. All your hands are pretty unique. There's a lot of decisions that come up that are very impactful on the game. If you mess up one thing, you could literally lose the game, and quite commonly do lose the game to one misplay. So I find that decision tree interesting of what do I do here, what do I do there, and often unique. A lot of people do assume it's brain dead, and it's not. It's really not. There's really like a lot of things that happen in the game, even though the games are so short. Like the games are 1 to 2 turns, sometimes longer, but like usually 1 to 2 turns. But there might be 20 decisions in those 1 to 2 turns.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot happens, and you just have to think through everything. You have to think through, how do I lose this game? How do I win this game? Like, what am I playing? What am I deciding I'm going to lose to? What am I deciding I can beat? And like figuring out how much you can beat and how safe you want to be, because sometimes it's not right to play around everything. Sometimes it is. It just depends like what your hand looks like and how far you think you can get with that hand, basically, if you wait or if you go, or like how you play out that hand. To me, it's quite interesting, and I've enjoyed the deck. It's not like, I don't know, I've played 4,000 or 5,000 matches on Oops now, and it hasn't got boring to me. Like, sure, some days you're like, I don't want to play this anymore, I'm frustrated, but like most of the time I come back to it. It's not something that I've ever really fully moved on from, so I enjoy it, at least. But really, not every deck is for everyone. I'm not going to ever like tell someone they should play a deck if they don't enjoy it. There's decks I don't enjoy playing, I don't play them. Like, it's as simple as that. I don't think people should force themselves to play things they don't enjoy, but you should try it. It's a fun time.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Because I feel pretty much the same way. The decision tree is really intricate, and yeah, it's pretty condensed, and I can understand that people don't want to have this sort of feeling when playing the deck. They want to have more attrition-based game style and more longer drawn-out games where they win via small little advantages, like Controller Delver or something, and simply ride it to victory. And for a lot of people, I can also understand that simply dropping Fuzz's Oracle and I win can be not as rewarding as bolting someone for free damage in the face, or attacking with a Delver, or with a Murktide, with a 12-12 Murktide or something. I can see this, but for me, it's not about the winning, but it's more about the way to the win. That's really interesting.
Sure. The other thing I encourage people to do is not just play one deck. Like, if you are getting bored of Oops, go take a break with a different deck. You can always come back. Like, you don't have to always play the same deck. I know in paper there's budget restrictions sometimes with that and complications, but like, online at least, we can play anything. Play anything. Play what you want. Like, take breaks. It's fine.
Yeah, that's also a pretty great advice that we made in our preparation for Eternal Weekend episode. I think it was 2 episodes before this one, where we talked about that you always have to play with your opponent's deck.
When I also think that's really important.
Testing sessions. So you learn the other side of the table, what to look out for, and how your opponent might behave. So that's really a great tip right now. And if you want to get better at playing Oops, you probably should switch to Delver when you give your opponent the Oops deck. Yeah,
it's definitely good to learn the play patterns of other decks too, like that, because you learn how they play against you. You learn how they could play against you, or like what they might do, and all that stuff. And it's just really helpful learning other decks and learning what beats you and stuff like that too. So yeah, I totally agree.
Awesome. And with this, I think we can go into a little advertisement mode. So if you like what we are doing, follow us on social media. It's @response_legacy. And also we have in response a listener survey right now running, where you can win one of our great merchandise t-shirts. So simply hop on our social media, fill out the survey, and maybe you can win one of those awesome t-shirts. Also, thanks for our patrons, Moritz Eichmeier, Matt Duncan, and Christian Neutz for the support. Thank you very much. Now, Nathan, we talk about your love child of Oops, because at first there was just one version, and now with the MDFCs of Modern Horizons 3, everything has split up. And now there's green-black Oops, blue-black Oops, and Oops Brews. So basically there are now more versions than one can probably count on one hand. So your love child is green-black Oops. It's more like the original one, and it's probably the fastest. So let's talk about the card choices, the strengths and weaknesses of green-black Oops.
Yeah, so green-black is what I started with in 2021, and kind of what we developed for years and continue to work on. It hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. Like there's been printings for it, but not a huge ton has changed in the overall structure of the deck. It's the most consistent and fastest build at turn oneing for sure. Blue black, for comparison, has about a 17% chance at winning turn one on a 7 or 6, and green black has about double that, around 33-34%.
Oh wow!
So it's significant, and green black is aiming to turn one. Like you are aiming to mull to a turn one, at least in game one. Post board, you slow down a lot. You're often cutting mana or keeping hands that are slower, sometimes without a spy, even if you're on a Xantid Swarm hand. But blue black is trying to be slow. They're trying to cast multiple spies in a game. Like they're fine if one gets countered because they can go again. They have more permanent mana. Green black's constructed to win on turn one as with the most protection you can. If you're going a little bit slower, that's fine, but you're aiming to win as fast as possible. I really enjoy the play patterns of that. It's debatable if that's better or worse than blue black, but the win rates are pretty similar overall. Matchup wise, it can be quite different though, win rate wise.
So we have now your deck list at the moment. I think
Sure.
The cards that are really standing out here, because probably not everyone has seen these already, is Summoner's Pact. Summoner's Pact is one of the core strategies of this deck, as far as I know.
Yeah, so Summoner's Pact we played in 2021 and was always played in Oops. A lot of lists these days seem to be cutting it for Once Upon a Time. I'm really, really low on Once Upon a Time, and so is most of the players in the Discord. But it's starting a bit of a shift in players that some lists are playing it and getting a lot of results with it. It's, to me, pretty inconsistent. You're pretty less than 50-50 to hit on it for a spy, so your mulligans, like you look at your hand and you're like, well, this may win or it may just lose. And I don't really want to be in that spot. I want to mulligan to a hand I'm confident I'm going to win on, and that's not what Once Upon a Time does. Summoner's Pact is guaranteed mana. It filters for mana into black with Wild Canter. Post board, I can find Foundation Breaker, which is one of the best cards versus blue decks. It's your easiest way to bait Grafdigger's Cage and other permanent hate cards that come out of blue decks, because you really don't want to side in Force of Vigor versus a deck with Force of Will, because you just can't protect it. I find that really important for the deck, and it also increases the speed a lot. Those Once Upon a Time decks are unreliable, slower. Like, I don't fully get the concept of it. Like, I get why they want to do it, but I don't really think it's optimal. And even though I think it's putting up a lot of results, I'm not really sure that means it's optimal. I think it's just being played a lot. That's the short of it. As for other cards in the list, the core of the deck right now is built to turn one as fast as possible with the most protection. Going down to 2 Thoughtseize increases the speed significantly, but on turn one, barely decreases the protection. It does make it so that you don't want to keep slower hands more often, because you have less protection to draw into, or you have less hands to go turn one Thoughtseize into turn 2 kill, but it means that your turn 1 consistency is a lot higher, and I believe the drop-off is something like 0.05%, like, of protection on turn 1 by playing 2 less. But you've increased speed by like 2% or something like that. So that's why we started doing that. I mean, we started doing that in the bobble meta, and it was mostly because you just didn't want to go, like, keep this slower hand and get bobbled, or get Thoughtseized or like griefed or whatever. But now with all that gone, it still has just felt right to be on 2 in the main and play more in the sideboard for like macabre decks and stuff where you need to go slower and protect yourself a bit more. As for other things, Lively Dirge is a card you might not see in a lot of lists. I'm a huge fan of that card. I think almost every list should be on at least one of them. It's a 9th spy. It costs 5, but it has other text too that can be funny. Like with if you have Reanimate and it in hand, it's just turns into a Dread Return.
Oh wow!
So there's text of that, yeah, it has text, but it's mostly just a 5-mana spy, which playing it as the 61st card currently is not decreasing the speed, not decreasing the consistency on turn 1 on the play by pretty much anything. I believe it's like 0.1% slower, but on the draw you have better odds keeping a turn 1 hand because you have an extra draw step to a mana. And even if you don't, like keeping a hand, you're just seeing more hands with spy in it, which is a good thing. In blue black, similarly in the list I've provided you, I've also added a dirge into that list, and I'm strongly kind of feel that dirge could even be a 2 to 3 of in blue black, but at least one. Blue black is trying to draw into spies quite often, and when you have 8 of them and you've got your first one countered, it's like, okay, I'm dead drawing in to find one, and I have more mana. Why am I not playing that card? Like, it has been very good in my testing in blue black, and it's been very good in green black, which is trying to win turn 1, but like it just makes even more sense to me in a slower build like that because you have more mana. So I'm very high on the card. I think in blue black it should either be 1 or 2 or 3. I know Ella1 was testing 3 or 4 of them at one point in blue black as well, and he says the card's quite good. But he isn't really playing Oops much anymore, but I'm sure he will be back at some point, and I'm curious to see what he does with his blue-black list when he does get back.
Oh, awesome. What I want to know is the single reanimate for our listeners, because just one reanimate in the list seems a little bit odd. Why would somebody just put one reanimate in?
Okay, so Reanimate was started by Faulted in, I want to say 2022 probably. He originally was playing it because he wanted more sideboard cards for blue decks, because top decking a Reanimate is basically like having a 5th Thoughtseize. So he was playing in the sideboard originally, and then it shifted into their main deck, realizing it was just a good top deck. But the other application of the card is it's extremely good with Memory's Journey. You have a lot of hands where you either can't win in 3 turns because your opponent's about to kill you, or like for various reasons you either can't cast your Oracle or they're going to kill you. So your pile with Reanimate is literally just 1 turn, put the Reanimate on top of your deck, reanimate the spy. That's usually in the case of Dread Return being exiled from Surgical or some other effect. But it also just having it in the graveyard leaves your opponent with far less options of what they can Surgical or Macabre even, because it just gives you these quicker journey lines. So it just, even if you're not using it very much, the existence of it is bad for your opponents. So I would not leave home without the card. Faulted would not leave home without the card. There's a few players in the Discord who were saying, why don't we just cut this? But me and Faulted are very much like, you have to play that card. It is too good to cut. I'm playing additional copies in the sideboard right now. It's really good versus blue-black because they're both a discard spell deck and a force of will deck. So when they see a hand with like Reanimates and a spy and some other stuff, they are left with very awkward options of what to take. Or even if they don't see a Reanimate, it's just your best top deck after they take your spy. So I've found it quite good as a sideboard card too. But yeah, the applications with Journey are the reason we have one in the main primarily, plus being good versus blue decks.
Speaking of Memory's Journey, I think this is probably the biggest culprit to Oops' success right now. The card is just insane. I think you have made a whole cheat sheet just
Faulted,
for Memory's Journey lines.
Faulted was also the one who added Memory's Journey. He started that, I really don't remember the year. It was either 2021 or 2022. It was not hugely long after we started developing Oops. I was very, very low on it in the beginning. I was definitely wrong on the card. It is incredible. Back then it had a lot less uses, but there was more hate to play around. I found like there was a lot less uses, but more variance in hate is what I would say. Whereas now we have very few like cards that's good against, but those cards are really played, like Macabre and Surgical and Spell Bombs and other stuff. And just through the years, there's been more and more tech that's come around the card, and yeah, so similarly, green-black right now plays Disciple, and I'm not really sure if all people who, I mean, there's definitely been people who join the Discord that's like, why are you playing this card over Turn Timber, or why is this card in the deck at all? What am I missing here? Disciple line is very sneaky. It's when your opponent tries to exile your Thassa's Oracle, and you'd be forced into a 3-turn journey line of put the Oracle and 2 petals on top or something that cast the Oracle. You now instead can go, okay, I'll put those 3 cards on top, and then I'll Dread Return my Disciple, sack my Poxwalkers, draw the 3, and cast the Oracle at the same turn. And that comes up a lot, like actually a lot. And part of the reason that comes up a lot is because you play Pact to Negation and Summoner's Pact, you're often casting those in the same turn you're trying to go off. And now you don't just die to that, because you now have a line that you win same turn, so you could have cast a Pawn or a Summoner's Pact or both in the same turn and still win, even after they've tried to exile your Oracle, which just previously wasn't possible. So that comes up a lot, and is quite good. But yeah, so Journey is another card I would not leave home with now. Without. It is insane. It should be in all main decks. Faulted is really high right now on Lantern. The card called Jack-O-Lantern.
Jack-O-Lantern, yeah.
To play with it, and most green-black lists are still on it. I'm personally not a fan of the card. It drops your turn 1 win rate, or turn 1 success rate by 1.5%, which is really high to play it anywhere in the 60 or 61. And that is a lot to sacrifice for something that in green-black, to me, does not come up enough. With Summer's Pact, and you just have enough green sources to reliably cast your Journey most of the time. Now, it definitely hurts sometimes when you're on lines where you are planning the Journey in the next upkeep, and you might not have a green source in play, or they might wasteland you off that green source. That's when it can become a problem. But if you're concerned about that, like, you can play the card. I just personally don't see it come up enough that I want to drop off that success rate, that turn 1 rate. You could also try to fit in the sideboard as option, or in versus certain decks, and I did do that in the previous meta, but it's just not a card I'm extremely confident that's necessary for the deck, but it is definitely helpful if you're having struggles with casting Journey. But all other lists have to run it because they're not playing enough green to cast Journey. Like, blue-black has to run the card, mono-black has to run the card. Some green-black lists have to run the card because there's not enough green sources, but the other thing that does come up in green-black sometimes to cast Journey is you can Dread Return your Wild Canter and then flash it back off the Wild Canter stack. So that's a thing that's missed sometimes too. So there's a lot of ways you can cast the Journey without having the Lantern, but it is useful if you're struggling.
The next thing I want to talk here is about the Singleton Poxwalkers in that list, because we are seeing a lot of different versions right now. Some are playing 4, most of them playing 2 right now, but I think Poxwalkers, at least 1 is mandatory.
So the minimum number of Narcomoeba effects you should be on is 4. I think 5 is fine. Me and Ella1 both think it's overkill to play 5. I don't really think it really helps with much, frankly. I think you can safe, like, 5 is definitely safe. Like, 5 is the most I would play 4 to 5. Like, you're playing 4 at least, and I would play a maximum of 5. I've seen some lists with 6 right now, and I think there's just absolutely no reason to do so. It's just wasting slots, making you less consistent, all that stuff. 5 is fine. 5 is definitely the most protective you can be without, like, playing excessive amount of cards. Playing 4 Poxwalkers, 1 Narcomoeba to me opens up a lot of vulnerabilities that playing any more Narcomoebas wouldn't. So I would play at least 2, probably 3 Narcomoebas and 1 to 2 Poxwalkers. Poxwalkers is really good. It has a lot of applications with if you've drawn a Narcomoeba and have an Undercity Informer, or just a lot of different combat lines with Journey and stuff like that. That's where extra Poxwalkers can benefit, is combat lines, but generally beyond the first, you really don't need more than 1 to kill them with a combat line, because it's just enough by itself. But the second is fine. I just would never play more than that.
Yeah, more seems a little bit egregious. But yeah, I think Shootin is playing 4 right now in his Once Upon a Time build.
Absolutely incorrect. Like, I think there's the worst thing you want to be in a spot of is having to flashback a Journey proactively, because it's a reactive card that if you have to flashback proactively to get your Narcomoeba effects into play, then opens you up to Graveyard Hate. And that's a bad spot to be in. when you just could easily not do that. There's really no good reason to be on that many Poxwalkers. It just doesn't beat anything that playing more Narcomoebas would. Narcomoebas are better into a surgical on Narcomoeba. It's better into a lot of things. And there's just no reason to be on 4 of them. There's no combat damage things that matter. I know Chowtin is playing Chromox, which might be one of the reasons he's playing more Poxwalkers, but again, I think any less than 2 Narcomoebas is crazy. I would be on 3 though. I think it's just the most safe. But you can be 3-2, you can be 2-2, I guess. But yeah, I wouldn't play less than 3 Narcomoebas generally. 2 is risky, but if you're gonna do 2, I would play the third Poxwalker because you just need that safety. So I really probably wouldn't go 2-2, but you could in theory go 2-2. It just does open you up to some weaknesses. The other thing that Poxwalkers can be quite weak against is Deafening Silence out of the sideboard, because you're forced to cast a spell to get your things back into play. So a lot of hands versus Deafening Silence, you can often just go Spy directly into cast Dread Return. But now if you're in that spot with 1 Narcomoeba and a Spy, you literally can't Dread Return that turn because you don't have the Poxwalkers to do it. You have to cast a Therapy or more likely a Journey on their turn or on your turn, then Dread Return the next turn or something. And that can then lose to Graveyard Hate quite easily. Whereas otherwise you might be on a Dread Return and then have the Journey up, but now you're just in a spot. So there's a lot of like small things that I think are really not worth running for Poxwalkers for. And I think Faulted would agree on that. He's generally on 2-3, or sorry, he's on 3-2, usually 3 Narcomoebas and 2 Poxwalkers. He likes the extra safety net. But he's not going to play. You're not going to see him playing 4 Poxwalkers probably ever likely either. So.
And for the mana base, that's for me also pretty interesting always, because there was so much talk about Fel the Profane when it came out, because it seemed like a huge problem solver, but now in your list it's nowhere to be seen. You've opted for the old staple Agadeem's Awakening and 2 Boggart Trawler with 3 Disciple Frailes. We already talked about the Disciple line, which is simply awesome. Why did you choose 4 Agadeem's Awakening and 2 Boggart Trawlers for the mana base?
When Fel came out, I tested 4 of them for about 80 matches. They never came up. Like, literally were never castable in green-black. I think in blue-black you should be on Fels. They're a lot more castable. You have a lot more mana sources in play. On green-black, there's very few creatures you care about that come down fast enough for you to care. Like, Dothy might be one of the ones you care about, but it's just not really a card you can really expect to beat anyway, because you're trying to cast a 4-mana spell versus a deck that usually has a lot of discard spells. And, yeah, so like the decks that play Dothy are going to rip your hand apart. You have to then have 4 mana for Fel and then 4 mana for your Spy afterward. Potentially even more mana for a Journey afterward too. It's just a lot to expect to assemble, and I'd rather just fold to Dothy than have this over extensive plan versus it that I don't think is really realistic. Agadeem's comes up a lot. For me at least. It is something that I wouldn't say fairly regularly, but a decent amount is castable as a spell to reanimate a Spy after it's being countered. It's like you're trying to draw into more Spies, or you're trying to draw into Reanimate, or you're trying to draw into Agadeem's, because Agadeem's for 7 mana is a thing that does come up from time to time. It's also a line. There's also lines with Journey where you can have a Cabal Ridden casted afterward to animate your Oracle. And that's not impossible either. It does come up from time to time. So just personally, I didn't love Fel when I tested it, and I have tried it since. I tried it as a 2-of with 4 Agadeems, and again, it just was not coming up very much. Boggart versus Fel, I think it's very minor. I think you can play whichever one you choose. I'm pretty confident playing 4 Agadeems is correct, but if you're on a budget, do whatever you want. It doesn't come up enough to matter, but like I think Agadeem's is the more optimal one for me, at least in green-black. But yeah, Fel versus Boggart, they both suck. Like, to me, they both suck. They're quite uncastable. Boggart, you have this plan of Beatdown, which does come up from time to time. I think that targeting opponent's graveyard is less relevant. It can be relevant. You could be against Dredge and cast your Boggart or something on a whim. or versus an Uro and cast it or something, but most of the time the XL effect is not going to be relevant. It's just going to be a 3/1 beater, which is not a dead card all the time. So that to me is why I play it over Fel still, but Fel is fine. If you want to play Fel, play Fel. A lot of players still do.
So, with the whole deck covered right now, what do you think are the strengths and the weaknesses of Oops in general and of green-black Oops in particular?
I think that Oops is not in the most fabulous spot right now, if I'm being honest. There's a lot of Delver decks playing 2 to 3 Grafdigger's Cage right now, and while you can answer Cage in green-black and most versions of Oops, it's still difficult to answer, and it's not something you really want to see. And these Delver decks are so consistent at like finding their stuff, especially when they're playing 3-ofs of them, and like loads of protection and Consign, Consign is a really difficult card to beat sometimes. Like sometimes you have Undercity Informer and it just does nothing, but other times you're like, here's my spy, I have 2 Pact Negation in hand, and they're gonna replicate it 3 times and have Force of Wills up 2 and Dazes, and you're like, okay, I'm dead. Like they have 1 card that counters you 3 times or something. It is really difficult to beat. So I'm not a huge fan of Oops right now in general. I think it's fine, but like I think it's probably performing better than it should be, just based on what the meta is. I think people still misunderstand the deck a lot, and that with good play you can beat most Oops hands, good play and good hate. So I think that against the top players, Oops is not the most fantastic choice, but against more less experienced players, it can be quite good because people don't really know how to beat it or how to play against it, which does gain a large advantage. Big thing for green-black right now is the Force of Vigors in the sideboard are really good again because Bauble's banned, which means it doesn't get countered. You couldn't really play in the Bauble meta. Like, we were trying to play it still, and it was just, you could basically only have it versus Eldrazi, where they were playing Chalice over Bauble. But versus Moonstompy and Painter, they were just like, Bauble you and your Vigors are useless now. So we were playing Nature's Claims and other things to try to get around that. But now that Bauble's banned, everyone's back on Chalice of the Void, and Vigor is suddenly good again because people are back on Leyline over Macabre as well in these hate-heavy decks. So Vigor's a really big reason to be green-black. Foundation Breaker off of Summer's Pact is another really good reason. It again is your best chance of beating Cage out of Delver. And then just the speed at green-black is the reason I'd still be on it. I think going slower in this meta is not fabulous, but it's fine. Like, blue-black is really not seeing a lot of play right now. I think it should be seeing more play than the Choudin build because I think it's better and more consistent, but it's not really seeing a lot of play. Part of that is Faulted's trying other things, and Ella1, who is a large driver in the deck as well, is playing Storm because he's really happy that Bauble got him banned. So
yeah, there are a lot of Storm players who are really happy right now. The mono black Besiege deck, or the
I think that's what he's playing, is like that, or like the Black Saga Storm or whatever. So
the fans are back right now.
I think Grouchy, who's another mod in the Discord, has also been playing Black Saga Storm too, instead of Oops. So just everybody's like, Bauble's banned. They were like, everyone was just so excited about it for Oops, and then just started playing other decks. Pretty funny.
I mean, it's understandable, because if you're a Storm aficionado, then you live for the Tendril stream.
Mm-hmm.
You talking about the deck building, because you are an incredible data-driven guy. Mm-hmm. These are always there seems to be sometimes like kind of a tension. There are two. You and Faulted have 2 totally distinct deck building philosophies, because Faulted is more on his vibes and his feelings towards cards, and you try to undermine everything with data. And
I think the 2 ways we approach things differently is Faulted likes playing cards that beat things he's worst against, even if those things he's worst against are a very, very small portion of the meta, whereas I like building for the top of the meta. So I think that's the biggest difference. Like, there is this thing where he does play cards for vibes more than testing. He's never actually tested Lively Dirge. He just dismissed it outright without ever testing it or ever looking at numbers, which surprised me for the amount of other cards he does test that are a lot more wacky. But it's just vibes for him on that one. For me, I do like looking at numbers. I initially was very against the Discord having any sort of calculator, but eventually I let it be approved, and we have this great guy Yakadir who made this calculator with a whole bunch of other programmers in the Discord, and it calculates all the turn one percentages, and if you change cards and stuff, it's really excellent. So I look at that from time to time for building decks. If I'm making small adjustments, numbers isn't everything, but it is good to keep those things in mind. And then we had data for a while. I've recently stopped it because I'm preparing to move and I don't really think I'm going to have time to do data anymore, but also because the deck it's really hard to track data when you have a lot of different plans going on and a lot of people playing 20 different lists. It's hard to like keep your data consistent because for me, blue-black is very different to green-black, and even within green-black, if you're playing Charbeltzers and Once Upon Times, it's quite different than playing a Force of Vigor and like other plans. So it's just like your matchup spreads is going to be kind of wacky. I didn't really feel it was worth keeping data anymore, but previously we had literally 17,000 matches on data, which is a fucking insane amount. Like,
yeah, that's awesome.
You don't realize how much magic that is in 3 years. Like, that's crazy. So that's a lot of data we were looking at, and it was just very fun to track that and pay attention to the matchups and kind of be like, I'm building my sideboard because I'm losing this, but this is this percent of the meta, and that's what I want to beat. So that's like me and Faulted our differences. He's really high on like Graveyard Hate. I wouldn't say he's high, but he's like, he likes playing Graveyard Hate in the sideboard, and at least in the previous meta, he was on 3 Leyline of the Void in his blue-black sideboard, and me and Ella1 were extremely against that, and we're like, why the heck are you still doing that? But he's like, well, because I lose to Reanimator. And looking at numbers, he was right. He does lose to Reanimator, but Reanimator at the time, like red-black Reanimator, was like 3% of the meta. And the total percent of the meta he was siding Leyline of the Void against was like 6%, and it was like the bottom 6%. It was like you had to scroll 20 decks down to get to the decks that he would side it against. So like when he was building sideboard guides, and there was literally like, the sideboard guides wouldn't even include decks that he was going to side Leyline of the Void against because they were so far down the list. So I was like, that doesn't make sense to do that. But he's like, well, that's what I'm losing to most, so I want to play against that. And I think, like, look, that logic makes sense. It's just not how I build a deck. I want to build for, I'm going to face this deck 20% and this deck 20%. I want extra cards versus those decks so I can make sure I beat them more percent of the time. That's how I build. And it's always how I've been building as a competitive player and as a combo player. Because previous to Legacy Oops, I was known for Omnitel and had done a lot of innovations on that deck and sideboards to that deck too. So yeah, it was just always, I build for the top of the meta, I build for the top 4 or 5 or whatever decks, and Faulted tends to build for the decks he thinks he will lose to more often. And I get that, it's just a different philosophy. So we do have some disagreements these days, but it's okay. We get along still, it's fine.
I think both approaches are totally fine and are totally worth it, and it's great that we have two minds collaborating here with such different philosophies, because I think it's just good for the whole Oops All Spells community. Talking about the deck building philosophy and your differences with Faulted, let's take a look at how you would build blue-black.
Yeah, so my blue-black list is pretty much identical to Ella1. Like this is literally his list plus a Lively Dirge, which is a card he was also testing, but like hasn't, again, is absent from Oops right now. But the sideboard is identical to what he was playing, and it's identical to one of the players, or pretty much identical to one of the players that he's been helping, who's also Ella1's in Germany, and one of his other friends plays in Germany, plays a lot of big paper events, has been doing really well with a list practically identical to this. So yeah, this blue-black list, I haven't really put a huge ton of thought into it, but it is just his list, practically. And the main difference is Faulted does not like Forcible, whereas me and Ella1 are very high on it. We both think it's the main reason to be on blue-black. Like, if you're going to be on blue-black, it's your Force of Vigor. It answers a lot of things. Ella1 is he likes it versus blue decks. I really don't like it versus blue decks, but it's kind of interesting how we think differently on that, but still come to the conclusion that it's one of the best sideboard cards to run in blue-black. The only thing that's really different here versus Ella1's list is Echoing Truth, which is a card Faulted was really high on in the past meta. I was a bit lower on it in the past meta because a lot of the hate you were trying to beat was just these like random 1 to 2 mana permanents, and having a 1 mana answer into the Flood Maw, which Ella1 was always playing, was just a lot more efficient than Echoing Truth, which is 2 mana. Like, the difference quite often meant a turn or two, and that is a difference. So
Yeah.
it also, like, sometimes you'd have times where someone would flash in some permanent or something on your turn, and you now you have a 2 mana card in your hand instead of a 1 mana card. So it was a difference. But now the reason I'm on Echoing Truth is Leyline of the Void is back, Chalice of the Void is back. Into the Floodmaw gets countered by Chalice, but it also can't bounce 2 Leylines, which isn't an uncommon occurrence. So it's just good to have that. I think he and his friend Frank they're playing a split right now. I think they're all like 2-2 or 2-1 or something between the Echoing Truth and Into the Floodmaw. I'd probably just be running all Echoing Truths just because of the Chalice Leyline decks, the decks you wanted against, and are just like playing those cards. So
yeah, for sure.
As for Stifle, Ella1 likes this card. I like this card. Faulted added it initially, and he's cut it since, but I think it's quite good in blue-black still. You want it versus like Painter, where you're countering activated abilities. It's good versus like Reclaimer Elves and so like Cradle Control and like other bog decks like lands and stuff. I like it there a lot, where you're like Stifle the Reclaimer trigger or Stifle the bog trigger, whatever. I think it's quite good. Faulted has cut it because he didn't feel it was coming in enough, and he felt you could beat those decks just with Oracle. I think Oracle's pretty awful against Painter because they're a Red Blast deck, which will probably leave in Red Blast versus you, because they have combos with Painter that just destroys your lands too. So like, it has a lot of text versus Oops, and even Delver decks. A lot of top Delver players will bring in Pyroblasts versus even Green-Black Oops just because it counters Pact and can kill Narcomoebas, which isn't normally a great thing, killing Narcomoebas, because you have Bridge from below, but it does sometimes have text. Sometimes you draw your bridge, or sometimes they can like double kill it or something. It does have applications basically versus Green-Black, and even more so versus Blue-Black. So Painter players are going to leave it in, and playing your 2 mana Oracle into a Red Blast is not the best plan. And I know Stifle, like, okay, is also a blue spell, but it's just less of a commitment, and it kind of works more easily. But as for numbers, the other thing is you could be running Duress or Reanimate there too. I'm fine with cutting like 1 Echoing Truth, 1 Stifle or something if you want 2 Duress, because it helps to have extra cards versus blue decks. Faulted really likes Duress, and I think it's fine. I think Duress or Reanimate, your choice of, is fine in the sideboard there. Any other questions?
Basically, Duress and Reanimate are for the same reasons, because if your opponent counters your... it doesn't make a difference if your opponent counters your Spy and you Reanimate it, or you Duress the counter away and then you cast your Spy. So that's what you're saying.
So Duress is a little bit better... is better in your opener, but Reanimate's a better draw. So like, if you don't have Duress in your opener and your Spy gets countered, you want to top deck the Reanimate, not the Duress. But if you have your opener, it's like pretty equal out. But Duress does have this like add bonus of information, which is quite good and is relevant. Like, being able to see, okay, they have a Macabre, I now have to play around this, is a lot more relevant than, hi, my Spy got countered, I'm going to now try to jam this Reanimate, and they're going to like Macabre my Spy, and I'm just kind of like out of resources again. So, or Macabre my plan, and maybe I don't have Journey up or something's gone wrong. So yeah, it's information. Information is always key. So Faulted likes Duress a lot more. I'm kind of debating back and forth on it. Like, the last time I ran Blue-Black, I got a trophy with, I think I was on 2 Reanimates in the sideboard over the Duresses, and it felt fine, but this was, I think, past meta, so it was a little bit more of the Blue-Black Reanimator where I really want the Reanimates. Versus Delver, I'm more inclined to have Duress, like, just discard spells, because they're just like on consigns and all that stuff. But versus Blue-Black, where they're playing discard, I'm more inclined to have Reanimates. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The only other thing is, Faulted likes playing 2 Jack-O-Lanterns, and Ella1 is really keen on 1. I think 2 is fine, but again, like, it is kind of slow and awkward. The reason Faulted likes playing 2, or part of the reason, is there's 2 reasons he likes it. One, he was playing Stifle before, and he likes it to be able to flash like have Stifle as an extra blue when you have Jack-o'-lanterns in the graveyard while still having Journey up. But the second reason was it was helping him cast oracles from hand versus like having two Jack-o'-lanterns, two black into two blue basically, or green into blue to cast oracles versus decks with permanent hate. And I think that's fine, but the problem is most of the decks you want that's an oracle versus are Leyline the Void decks, and then your lantern does nothing. So kind of don't like it, but you could be playing the second. And if you were to play the second, you cut a blue land, which is what Faulted does.
I mean, I can see this. I'm also pretty high on Jack-o'-lantern. Also, was pretty high on it in last meta because it's simply sometimes randomly exiled an Atraxa that got entombed or something because your opponent simply can't read the card.
Yeah, it legitimately does have text too. Like, it's a card that does things. So it's funny. It's good. Like I don't hate playing the second. I just don't know that it's necessary, but it's fine to play the second. The only other thing with the playing the second is when you're on the second, you do cut the blue land, which makes your forcible count a little bit lower, which is a thing because your forcible count is already decently low, I would say, especially in the matchups where like LO1 usually boards in versus blue, so then you have Pact, which I guess you could pitch to it. But again, like if you're pitching Pact, it's not really like a pitch because you could have just Pacted all of the time. But for me, I sided in mostly versus like prison decks and decks that like want to counter their permanents on, but also like maybe have it on my turn, but more for their things. And then you're cutting pawn, so like your blue count is low. Like you bring in Echoing Truth or Oracle in addition, but your blue count's relatively low. You don't have cantrips like blue decks do to filter for extra blue cards. So having more blue lands is, even if it's just one, is relevant sometimes. But yeah, I don't hate the second lantern. It's fine.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Last Friday, my Jack-o'-lantern exiled the surgical targeted Thassa's Oracle from my graveyard, so I could simply win through the surgical.
Nice.
That was also pretty great. And then I can Memory's Journey back because what they did was like, with Narcomoebas on the stack, I surgical your Thassa's Oracle, I activate Jack-o'-lantern, try to counter the surgical, and then they tried to Fairy Macabre, and then I went to Memory's Journey. So basically had everything, so it was awesome.
Everything going on. Yeah.
Was awesome. So with this little talk, why would somebody choose green-black over blue-black?
Well, right now nobody's really playing blue-black, but and I think that the real reason is speed. Green-black has got speed, green-black's got Force of Vigor, which I think is way better than Echoing Truth. Like,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's like, it's better than Echoing Truth. I think it's a lot better than Oracle as well. It just, for me at least, it's easier to do the green Force of Vigor plus green card than getting to 6 mana. But like, I know there's times where you like Undercity plus Pass than Oracle, but I just generally I think that's a lot better. Force Will right now is less needed. There seems to be less combo than the previous meta, and less like Stompy are again a little bit better against now that they're not on bobble. So you just kind of can vigor the hell out of them and not care. And so I just like the speed of green black. But blue black is perfectly fine. You're obviously doing well with it still, and Frank in Germany is also doing quite well with it. So it's being played in paper at least. Online I haven't seen a huge ton of results from, but similarly my build isn't getting a huge ton of results, but I'm not really playing a huge ton of oops right now. I've been playing Delver and Moon Stompy online primarily. Just kind of, I like that. I don't know. I have played oops online and it seems fine still, but it's just for me, I've gone back to playing other decks because I need a break sometimes. But yeah, green black is, it's faster. It's got the better against graveyard hate from my perspective at least. I think it's better against graveyard hate. But the advantages of blue black for sure is against blue decks you're more resilient. I'm not sure by how much exactly, like win rate wise, at least in the past meta, I was doing better than Faulted. Like barely, but by a win rate, like between the two of us at least, I had a higher win rate. I was playing green black, he was on blue black. And but he had played about double the matches, so who knows how long my win rate would have held. But so it's all, yeah, it was close is what I'm making the point of. Whereas blue black was putting up a lot more trophies and he was playing a lot more, and LO1 was playing a lot more, but the win rates were pretty similar. Matchup wise, they were pretty similar as well. Blue black seemed to have an advantage against the blue black Reanimator deck, but not by a huge ton either. Versus Jeskai, it also seemed a little bit better, but again, not by a huge ton. We were both kind of just beating it because it's a slow blue deck. That's kind of what Oops is. Like, Oops doesn't care about blue as long as they don't have pressure or hate, basically. And Jeskai was kind of a deck that just kind of dirtled around and like might have a few forces versus you, but you're like, you can set up enough because there's like literally no pressure. Whereas Delver or Reanimator could just kill you like really fast, especially with you shocking yourself every time you played a land. Like bolt yourself for 3, and they're like, that's a bolt closer to dead. Like,
still always hurts.
But yeah, blue black definitely has advantage still versus blue decks, I would say, just because you have so much more discard. Like having 4 Thoughtseizes in the main is really good, and be able to like go, okay, my spy gets countered, I don't just die. Whereas green black might just die if their spy gets countered. Blue black can usually go a second time or third time even, or fourth time even. So blue black has the advantages there. Green black I think is a lot better versus permanent hate. And cage post board. Blue black tends to struggle versus cage post board, because most often cage is out of blue decks, and Faulted usually was not siding Justice Oracle or Echoing Truth any stuff versus that. He would most often just scoop to it. Even the times I've played him online, like when I play Delver and he's on blue black or whatever list, if I play a cage, he just scoops up the cards and leaves. Like, okay. So
wow.
The deck has kind of got that weakness, and now green black is also very weak to cage out of Delver. You at least have Summer's Pact for Foundation Breaker, which costs you 1 sideboard card to bring in. It's not a bad plan, and you can protect it with your Pact Negation. So it's a pretty simple plan that you can do versus them. I mean, you always bring it in. The amount of times it works through days and consigns and everything else these days is not extremely high, but it comes up and definitely wins games still. So better versus cage, weaker versus the deck in general. I think it's better versus Moon Stompy and those kind of decks. It's also a lot better against Storm. Faulted struggled a lot versus Storm decks, and like Reanimator, like typical like red black Reanimator with blue black. And the reason for that is you're just like not gonna kill them turn 1 as often, and he's not playing Leyline of Sanctity either. Leyline of Sanctity we play in green black mostly for Bajuka Bog decks, whereas he was playing Stifle and other like Oracle bringing in against those. He would bring in Sanctity and would stop the Bog, and it would stop the Endurance, it would stop all those effects. But it also doubled versus Storm, where you just put it in play and they either have side in an answer or they happen to die, or they're like emptying the Warrens you or something, which gives you another turn. So you could often like literally just keep hands with Sanctity and not winning turn 1 or turn 2 or even without a spy, and you're just like, here's my Sanctity. Do you have an answer in your deck for this? And some of the time they would just scoop the game.
Okay.
Like so there was that factor, and Faulted like on like tests we used to have like a 90% win rate against or something on green black, and Faulted's I think is closer to like 60 or 70% on blue black. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but it was a lot tighter, just because they would have a lot more time to kill you. Like, you just didn't have the Sanctity, you didn't really have, he wasn't on Force Wills, he was on really no answers for them just killing you. And he wasn't, like, his deck isn't consistent to win on turn 1. So, or turn 2 even. So it's not like it was just, you try to mull for a turn 1, but then they might just kill you first or something.
Yeah, that happens a lot of the time. Yeah.
So yeah, it's weaker to Storm. It's weaker to Reanimator. Similarly, discard can be bad because you don't have the same resources. Like, it's hard to explain it. You're slower. Like, you might draw into it eventually, but they might just kill you before you get there. Whereas green black, you're like, okay, I have all this mana. I literally just need this spy now or something. If they discard your spy, so. Whereas blue black, you might have the mana, but it's spread out over 4 turns or something, and they could just keep ripping your hand apart with discard spells. So yeah, that matchup's I think better on, and like, similarly with Sanctity too, you can board in and stop their discard. So yeah, I like it a lot more versus Storm. I like it versus the Moon Stomping Eldrazi. Um, but versus like Delver, it's a little bit weaker just because of you can't cast Spies again.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Now we have a short section about how do you see the future of Oops. I mean, we can't look into our hourglass or something and see the next printings for Oops, but we can see that there's now another branch right now, and that's Mono Black.
Yeah, so Oops is going in a lot of different directions right now. Mono Black is one of them. Faulted's been playing around with various builds. The biggest problem with Mono Black is post board. It like pre-board, I think it's always like I've tried a lot of Mono Black too. Like before Faulted was even screwing around with it, I was trying like various different builds, like sort of similar to what he's doing. Even he's playing Belcher, I've tried that. He's playing Creature, I've tried that. Like I've tried pretty much everything. He does seem to have more success. The one thing he has tried that I had not tried was playing a 15 card green sideboard. I mean, he's on 14 green cards, but like he's literally playing the entire green black main deck and sideboard in the sideboard. And he's had a lot of success with that, and it's pretty cool. And I actually like the idea behind it because you're like, okay, I have more discard spells in the main deck now, so I'm like better game one in theory. But then post board, I have all these answers that like green black is having success with. So I think that list actually has a lot of potential. It's a little bit, it has some awkwardness. Like I haven't got to test it yet, but the awkwardness I see is that against things like Delver, where you want Breaker, or you like some decks where you want Breaker but non-Figure, and he's even said this, it's just a little bit awkward of like how much you board in, because your Breaker is now a lot harder to cast because you're just not, unless you're bringing in all the green lands too, and then you're cutting, like it's just weird on the mana wise and like how many cards to bring in and how to sideboard. But beyond that, I think this list has a lot of potential. I like it a lot more than the lists he's trying that are mono black with Belcher, because Belcher is quite hard to cast in frankly anywhere, but like especially these lists where you're just shorter on mana. But yeah, I think that list has a lot of potential for sure. So I'm interested to see how well he continues to do with it, because I do think it's interesting. I'm a little unsure if it's better than just doing green black, because you're like, okay, I have this entire sideboard committed to this, and I'm like, don't really have anything versus Cage again, or like it's weak against Cage, and you're also like don't have anything additionally for like blue decks or combo decks really, besides all the discard. But like it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting way of going about things, and it's definitely a better idea than I've ever had when I've tried mono black, because I've tried all the creature plans, I've tried all the Belcher and stuff, and it just never felt like it was gonna work, because there is post board, there's so much permanent hate that mono black just can't beat. The other thing he has been trying recently is like Feed the Swarm and also playing Nature's Claim in the sideboard. I don't know if his Nature's Claim list is here somewhere. He was trying a 4 Feed the Swarm and 4 Claim.
Yeah, I've seen the 4 Feed the Swarm and 4 Nature's Claim.
Yeah, so that, yeah, here it is. So how was he doing that though? He was on, I think, literally just Jack-O-Lantern and Elvish Spirit Guides and Petals, I guess, for the Nature's Claim. So that's another interesting one. I'm not so confident those claims are very castable when you need them to be. But I think like his thing on that is it's better than nothing, and I do understand that side of it, but I'm not sure that that's better than just doing his other plan of play the green cards like the Vigors. And Feed the Swarm is a card I had tested a bunch in mono black. It is really bad. Like it's good, but like 2 mana to destroy one thing that isn't an artifact is not fabulous. Let's just say the least. Like it's good. It kills Dothy Voidwalker, which is really nice. It kills Leyline of the Void, which is really nice. It does not answer 2 Leyline of the Voids. It does not answer Artifact Hate, which is often played alongside Leyline of the Void. So it's iffy. Like yeah. I think I like this plan a lot less than his other list with the Summer's Pact and Breaker and Vigors, but it's interesting to see it branching out, and again, he's developing it a lot more than I ever got however far I got with mono black, which was not very far. I was just losing a bunch while trying to cast belchers and creatures that were just dying to the removal that everyone left in. And some people say like, oh, people side out removal versus oops. Yeah, some players do. It's generally not advisable because like green black's on Swarm and it does have relevant text versus a lot of these lists that are not playing Bridge from Low or playing like all the Poxwalkers and stuff. So, and also just like Faulted, he plays a lot of these lists where he can cast out Undercity and pass the turn. And having a bolt is very good versus Undercity that's just sitting there. So it is I would not recommend siding out removal versus oops. You often even see a lot of the top players again like siding in Pyroblast, but also I've seen players literally side in extra removal versus oops. I think it's fine too. I think a lot of Delver players misunderstand. Like you often see them like inexperienced players. The first thing they cut is just like 4 bolt, and I'm like, what are you doing with these Mishra's baubles? Like you're having 4 bauble. Like you can literally cut lands and baubles versus oops. You need your blue cards. You need some removal. You need your creatures. You do not need all your baubles. I know they scry. I know that they do things with the ERC. You do not need 4 baubles in versus oops. You can cut like 2 or 3 of them even. Like it is the worst card in your deck after your lands basically versus oops.
Yeah,
which again versus better. Oops you can often trim 1 land as well. So I think that's a mistake that people make versus oops a lot is cutting all the removal, and then just hey, there's an Undercity sitting there you could have killed, or like other things. But yeah, I think that it's interesting. Oops is going in a lot of different directions right now. There's a lot of different green black lists having success too. I'm not a super fan of most of them, but it's good to see the deck getting results regardless. And I think it proves that the deck's really powerful. Kind of no matter what you put in your deck. So yeah.
I'm pretty sure the only thing that oops right now needs to be really the top of the meta is something to something main deckable or sideboardable to really answer Grafdigger's Cage.
Yeah, Grafdigger's Cage is certainly the biggest problem for oops right now, I would say. It like the biggest problem years ago was Macub. Macub is fairly useless versus oops now. Like it obviously is very good. It is very good. It's still probably your second or your first best non-permanent hate versus oops. But it's like there's so many different lines with Journey now that just get around it. Like no matter what you target, you will lose to something. Like if you don't have backup. I think the other misconception about Macub that often people fall into is they keep hands that just have Macub, or maybe just Macub and like one other like slight hate. You're not gonna win a game versus oops with that. You have to have a hand that has Macub plus extra stuff. Like if you're on a blue deck and you're just keeping Macub versus oops, you're losing. Like you're 100% losing. You have to have Macub plus Force of Will or Macub plus a couple days in Wasteland or something. Like something more has to be going on than just that Macub. So while it is strong hate, you're not gonna win just with it most of the time. But yeah, Cage is a massive problem, and I don't really know. Like, I wish there was like an uncarable answer, but it also sort of needs to be tutorable because like just playing even uncarable answers is like not fabulous. Because again, I don't really want to side in Nature's Claim versus Delver. It's a card I could be playing on green black right now and siding it in versus Delver because I know they play 2 to 3 Cage. But if they don't draw their Cage, it's entirely dead. And even if they do draw their Cage, it's like I have to resolve it on my turn. I have to draw it, and like yeah, it's not fabulous. Whereas Breaker, you don't have to draw it. You have to draw one of your 4 Summons packs. So you have 5 answers. Whereas you bring in your 2 claims or whatever, your 3 claims. It's just like okay, I have to draw into this card, have the extra green mana, resolve this thing. Yeah, it's a lot. But yeah, an answer to Cage would be nice. And beyond that, the other thing that would be really great for Oops, that everyone in the Oops Discord for years has kind of been memeing about is a Black Spirit Guide.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
it's kind of been the meme about thing forever, but also like beyond Black Spirit Guide, the other thing that people meme about is like having a spy that's summer is pactable. So like if you had a spy that was black green hybrid or something would be very nice.
Oh wow, yeah.
But yeah, so beyond like more 4 mana spies and a Black Spirit Guide, I'm not really sure what could be printed realistically. I mean, none of those are realistic, but there's not a lot the deck could gain. I think that things that would benefit Oops most is cards getting banned. I would say like the other card that is somewhat problematic is the Eldrazi command and also Consign. But those cards just aren't gonna get banned. Consign would go down in play a lot though if Eldrazi stopped being a deck or stopped being as good. Like a lot of people in the last ban announcement were saying that something from Eldrazi has to get banned or should get banned or at least will get banned. I don't know. I didn't think it was gonna happen. I thought it would be lucky if we even got Bobble, which we did. I don't personally. I wasn't thinking we needed to be ban Bobble, but I was very happy with it gone as well. So like I'm okay with that. Like I hated playing against it, but like I didn't think it needed to go per se. So I was like more than happy when they banned 2 cards, not just 1. But if they do ban something out of Eldrazi and Eldrazi goes down in play, Consign would be played a lot less, which is certainly a problematic card against dupes because again it's just a 1 card that can become 3 counters basically.
Yeah,
which is really good.
You always have to have the under 16 former line against Consign.
Yeah, basically, or kill them before they get to 3 mana, basically. Because if they're replicate once, sometimes you can beat, but like if it's replicating 2 more times, you're just not beating that. Like you're just like sitting there with your pawns in hand. You're like, I see.
Or sometimes they are, they make the mistake of consign your Narcomoebas. That's also not a great play.
I've seen that before. There's also still a lot of people out there who are surgicaling and trying to macabre Narcomoebas, and it's just like, here's my handy Poxwalker. You're dead. Like,
yeah, that's just so awesome. Yeah, thank you very much, Nathan, for this deep dive into Oops All Spells. It's awesome to have you on the show. Yeah, it's just great to have you here as one of the Oops masterminds, basically. Mm-hmm. Do you have some closing words before we hop over to the next guest?
Not really. Just play Oops. It's fun. And I'll see you in Austria soon.
Oh, for sure. I would love to see you here. Also, where can people find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter at Lipetz Nathan, but my account's on private because I hate Twitter now. So, but
fair enough.
You can still try to follow me, and I will accept people who aren't bots. But it's mostly on private because it's bots. And then on Blue Sky, I think it's the same. I think it's also Lipetz Nathan. If not, it's Nathan Lipetz. You'll find me. And on Discord, Nathan Lipetz, period. And yeah, that's about it. I don't know. I'm on Twitch too, but I really rarely stream anymore, so it's just Nathan Lipetz on there as well.
You will probably stream more when you're in Germany, I think. When you've got more.
I think less, frankly, because I just have less. Like, I will have less time, but also like not the setup anymore to do it.
Fair enough. But it would be great to see you on stream again. So thank you very much, Nathan. And have a nice moving session, basically in end of January. Right?
Yeah, it's like 4 weeks away. It's crazy.
So you have everything packed up?
So soon. No, nothing's ready. Okay. I'm so behind.
So thank you very much. We move over to the next guest. So guys, after we had Nathan Lipetz on the cast, we are now here with Patrick, aka Faultedform. Patrick, it's great to have you here. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
Awesome. Patrick, tell us something about you. I mean, pretty much people are knowing you as Faultedform, and you are most prominent for playing this specific kind of deck, which is Oops All Spells. So, how did you get into Magic? And yeah, tell us something about you.
Well, I started getting into Magic when I was around 7 years old. It was during Revised.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had a cousin who went to the local comic shop a lot, and I would go with him. And he bought me like a starter deck for Christmas. and it started from there. So my older sister played, and she taught me how to play.
Okay,
So-
your sister taught you how to play. That's very rare, actually.
Yeah. So back then, her best friend played as well, and then her little brother, who was my age, played. So
And
that's how I got started.
Wow, and what was your first deck?
My first deck, I feel like I remember I had a Sarah Angel and a Northern Paladin, and then we just like jammed all the circle protections in the decks.
Awesome. Sarah Angel is one of my most beloved old school cards. Beautiful card.
My sister had Vesuv and Doppelgangers, because that was like a kind of a chase rare at the time. It was worth like $20, if you can believe that being like a good thing. But so I played through up to I think 7th edition. Was that when they did the modern frame?
No, that was 8th edition.
8th edition? Okay, so when the modern border came out, that's when I quit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't get back into Magic until Avacyn Restored.
Okay, that's a pretty long hiatus.
Yeah. So at that point, I had no concept of like tournament Magic or anything like that. And I got back in through Standard. And then I kind of used that as a vehicle to jump through to Modern.
Okay, yeah.
And I wanted to end up in Vintage.
Okay.
But once I got to Legacy, I kind of stopped and felt comfortable there. Like I was enjoying Legacy a lot.
Yeah, actually,
So that's how
Legacy is probably one of the greatest competitive formats. Vintage is a little bit more, I want to say, a little bit more random due to the nature of the restriction of the cards. I feel like that, yeah.
Well, I was playing Vintage on MTGO. So I was playing Pitch Dredge. And at the time, they had like a Dark Depths sideboard. So you would just switch into that. And that is how I got into Legacy. When I chose my first deck, I played Dark Depths. So I was playing Green-Black Turbo.
Awesome. First Legacy deck, Green-Black Depths. And how did you get to Oops then? Because it's pretty different. I mean, when you were saying, yeah, I played Dredge, then it's pretty much self-explanatory to come to Oops or to other graveyard decks. Like on my side, it's I started with Death in Texas, then went over to Pyromancer, and then simply switched into graveyard decks, came into Dredge, and then to Hogak, and now Oops. And it was a slippery slope, actually. And Oops is just, at the moment, probably the best graveyard deck.
Well, so I was on Turbo Depths. I prefer to be like a deck expert. So I pick one deck and I just kind of play it relentlessly. And I did that for maybe 4 years. But the turning point came when Ragavan came out, because Green-Black Depths couldn't be a Ragavan. The deck doesn't have any blockers. Everything in the deck is a 1-drop, and they're all good against itself. So if a Ragavan hits, they can take your Pithing Needle, they could take a Thoughtseize, they could take a Crop rotate their own Wasteland.
That sounds really hurtful right now.
Yeah, it was almost impossible to be a turn 1 Ragavan. So at the time, the MDFCs had just come out. So Oops was starting to gain traction as an actual deck because it had lands now. And I'd seen some players having success with it, and I was kind of feeling bummed out with Turbo Depths, so I switched over, and I was having so much fun with it. that I wanted to do my best to try to make it into a competitive deck. So I did a lot of tuning, because I'm also the kind of person who has like a chip on their shoulder. So if people are like really pretentious blue players, I really want to take them down a peg with like a crappy deck.
Yeah, I feel this. I love that also.
So I tried to put a lot of work into making Oops as competitive as a deck as possible, and not just a joke.
Awesome. I think we are right now at that point that people are suddenly taking it a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we even had Bob Wang, who called for an Oops ban. I mean, which was just insane. We'll put the Twitter link into the show notes, and so our listeners can make up their mind about that, because I think it was a little bit ridiculous, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit hyperbolic, but I don't think it's too big a threat. If you play the right hate, it'll shut the deck down. Not completely, but it'll just make it harder for the Oops player.
Yeah. I mean, you can play through a lot of hate, that's true. But it's nowhere near the, I don't know, Delva Ragavan, Delva Oko, or Delva Expressive Iteration times. I mean, or even if you go the combo route, like Garuda. Garuda was a totally different beast. And also Initiative. I mean, we had far more broken stuff in Legacy that was legal for some time, yeah.
Yeah.
So with this out of the way, I think we can go over the next big question here in the room, and that's, why should someone play Oops in the first hand?
I think that I just think it's very powerful, and I think if you understand the deck and know how it functions, then I think you can navigate through the format pretty easily. I think it's strong versus a lot of blue decks, which is nice. And the thing that I always appreciated about the deck is it helps you become comfortable with losing. If you're somebody who struggles with losing, you kind of have to lose a lot with the deck to learn. And then you also lose, like say you steal game 1 and then you lose game 2 and then you try to win game 3. So it just makes you comfortable with playing and kind of takes the nervousness or anxiety out of it. Mm-hmm. And I just find it really fun. I think it's really technical. You know, once you mill the yard, once people put up hate and you're trying to navigate through that field, I just find it really exciting.
Yeah, I can just say the same, because it's always for me to solve the puzzle that you're winning right now. Is you only have limited resources because your yard is already filled. And it's like, okay, I now have to work with the cards in my hand. The 3 to, maybe 5 cards that are really doing something from the graveyard, and then winning through 2, 3, 4 hate pieces is also extremely satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So navigating through hate is, if you're a player who loves to navigate through hate or to solve puzzles, Oops is certainly one of the decks for you. I'm pretty confident in saying that. Are there other choices why someone should play Oops? I mean, it's also a pretty, it's pretty off the wall deck. So people aren't expecting it that much, and it's not that there aren't that many pilots actually in the field.
Yes. And I think that when people first pick it up too, I think that there's an initial bonus of quote unquote free wins because people don't expect someone to be on it. Like, I always make the joke that I play Oops on hard mode because people just look up my name or they associate my name with the deck. So most of my game ones are people already mulliganing aggressively to force a will.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what like, I get a lot of flack in the Discord because they say I tend to play slower or like more methodical. And that's kind of what caused that result, is because I have to expect that most opponents already know what I'm on. So my approach is a little different because I have to be a little more careful and I can't just jam turn one all the time or like highly focus on turn ones. It's more about navigating what the opponent.
Mm-hmm. I totally feel you because I'm the same boat. I'm playing almost exclusively graveyard decks since 2018 right now. So at first, like I said, Reg Hogak, now Oops, and with a little bit of Tin Fins in between, or Phoenix combo. Basically everything evolves around the graveyard. So people are always expecting me to play some kind of graveyard deck. And they're always, I'm in the same boat, they're always keeping mulliganing to really, really bad hands, like double Wasteland, double Force, and it's like nobody would ever in an open tournament keep these hands, and you're trying to keep it, just a simple turn 2 with protection, and it's often not enough because people are already setting you on that deck. So I can totally understand this.
So what drew you to the graveyard decks? What do you enjoy about them?
My first deck was, like I said, Death and Taxes, and then I loved Pyromancer. I played Mardu Pyromancer with Deathlight Shaman, Gitaxian Probe, and Cabal Therapy, and really drawing cards and playing things, flashing back Lingering Souls, flashing back Cabal Therapy was my first gateway drug into graveyard decks. And then Dredge was the next thing that I wanted to look up because it was cheap back then. So I built it, and suddenly, playing out of your graveyard, using your graveyard as a resource, as your hand basically, was just, it's even better than drawing cards because you have so much to do. And that's what I really love always about playing graveyard decks or playing combo in general, is that you have a lot of options. And simply having a lot of options, playing a lot of cards, drawing a lot of cards is always awesome. And how can you draw more cards than flipping your deck over into your yard and playing everything that's in? I mean, that's like drawing 60 cards at once. How can you not love that?
That's why I've been trying to spread the word about Leyline of the Void being the best answer, because we just went through this era where blue-black, Froginator was taking over, and everybody was on like Fairy Macabres or Ghost Vacuum, targeted graveyard hate. And I'm like, listen, if you give me access to the whole graveyard, like,
You're
the
going
world's
to
at my
lose.
fingertips. Yeah. So really your best option is to use Leyline of the Void and just don't let me have access to that. It's not unbeatable, but it's going to be a hell of a lot harder to fight through.
Yeah, I mean, especially...
And I feel like that shift is starting to happen.
Yeah, especially with the deck that we're talking over in the next few minutes. There are so many ways to beat Leyline or also triple Leyline. Basically, it's just... Yeah, it doesn't... It's a bump in the road, but it's not a wall that we can't win against. So with this, I think we should focus now on blue-black oops. So, I think blue-black oops was your love child, or basically your baby. You invented it, and let's talk a little bit about the card choices, and especially the strengths and weaknesses of blue-black oops.
Yep. So it came about when MH3 came out with the new MDFCs. I felt like Sink into Stupor was just too strong of a card to not try to build around. In green black, I already had like one Seagate just for like weirdo Oracle piles and things like that. And to have actual blue lands and then Sink being a bounce spell or a potential counter spell, it just felt like, why would you not want to have that main deck? So then I started to build around it in a sense. And, you know, whether I'm playing green black or blue black or mono black, I always follow the same kind of template. Because I view Oops as like a templated thing where you have, you know, X amount of mana sources, you know, all the cards that should be in there, the standard cards. You have your easy side out cards, and then your sideboard should target specific things. You know, like in green black, you have Force of Vigor, Foundation Breaker. So like if you transfer to blue black, then it's okay. You had 5 slots there, you know, 4 more technically because of the Summoner's Pact to get that Foundation Breaker. So that's why I chose to do so like 3 bounce spells and then 3 Oracle. So that way, after sideboarding, you know, if you're answering a Leyline or Graveyard Hate, then you have the 4 Sink into Stupor, you have 3 bounce spells, 3 Oracle. So it's technically like 10 answers to, you know, Graveyard Hate. And then, I mean, it's basically, you know, a few slots for discard for blue decks. It's really weird because the meta now, it almost feels like you don't need to sideboard a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So you have those dedicated slots to, you know, like hard permanent based hate. Oracle can beat that. Oracle can beat stuff from the hand. And then you have like I said, the discard for blue decks to kind of get a little more edge in that matchup. And then it's like anti-combo hate. Because the only thing that I ever feel like I struggle against, like where I don't have as much agency, is decks that are faster than me. So that's why I tend to add things like Leyline of the Void or Disruptor Flute. Things that if the opponent can go first, you know, I have a potential to lose just because they won the coin flip. But the main difference with blue-black that kind of separated itself from green-black is just more of the MDFC lands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're playing 16? Or 15 or 16?
15.
15.
I ended up cutting one for second Jack-o'-lantern.
Oh yeah, Jack-o'-lantern is also such a great card. I love it.
Yeah, so the addition of all the lands, it gives you a more stable mana base in blue-black. Because the original green-black, it felt like something where you were just trying to turn one all the time. And if you failed, then you lost. And cutting the Summoner's Pact for more lands just made it feel more resilient. So you could do things like, you know, play out an Undercity Informer and pass the turn. And if they killed it, you could play Balustrade Spy the following turn. And it just gave you more shots to play your creatures. So it wasn't just, you know, I'll try to slam this once, and if it fails, then I lose. So, you know, if you can set up a situation where you play an Informer and it gets countered, you just let it resolve. And then you play Spy the next turn and it resolves and you win. That's kind of the same concept of having a Pact of Negation. You know what I mean? You still fought through a counter You just went a little slower.
Or
And
if you
then the
have
other-
5 mana, you drop a Balustrade Spy, they counter it, and it's just like, I reanimate.
Yeah, for sure. And it just feels like you have more chances. And if you, God forbid, you get to a spot where you have 4 land in play, then every top deck is live. So you never really feel like you're out of the game.
Yeah, that's true. I also think this blue-black is a little bit more built for the long run. Green-black has more of a feeling of a one-trick pony. And also it's insanely good at that. It's always feels like, okay, I have to use all my resources, and I have to draw perfectly to come back into the game. And I don't think with blue-black you have these kind of draws, because like you said, every draw might be live again.
There's a lot of situations in green-black where, like, say you had 2 mana sources and a Summoner's Pact and an Informer in hand. Like, and you would be in a lot of situations where you would just want to slam the Informer and pass the turn, and like you would be good there. But you'd have to hold it because you can't play the Summoner's Pact or you'd lose.
Yeah, so I think Summoner's Pact was also for me all the time a little bit of a bottleneck.
Yes. It was a big revelation to kind of move on from that and just play more lands and kind of go slower. And I say slower kind of tongue-in-cheek because it's really like, instead of turn 1, you're turn 2ing, turn 3ing. So it's not really like slow, but comparative to green-black, it's a little slower.
Yeah, I think if we go over with Nathan's research here, I think Nathan has said you have about 32% turn 1 in green-black, and about 17% turn 1 in blue-black, something like that. You are maybe half as fast. So like you said, turn 2 would be pretty normal to combo with blue-black.
Yeah, and it has made a huge difference to play in a way. Like in green black, I feel like you would always get in these situations where you're debating whether or not to combo turn 1 or Thoughtseize pass and then combo turn 2. You know what I mean? Like you get in those situations where you don't have all the mana to do it, so you have to kind of pick one. And in this deck, because there's more lands, you're not as susceptible to wasteland, so you feel a lot more comfortable Thoughtseizing and then going turn 2. Because you're kind of forced into it. Because you need the 2 land drops or something like that. And it's led to like safer gameplay and more reliable wins, I would say.
Yeah, I also think with blue-black, as soon as you resolve your spy or your Undercity Informer, there isn't a lot of your opponent can do. It's pretty much game over because you have all the tools. And for this, the Jack-O-Lantern is just the premier breakout card from the last few months.
Oh, for sure. It makes the deck so technical, and that's why I cut the 4th hydroelectric specimen. So I cut that for an extra Jack-O-Lantern because it had so much more utility for making Memories Journey piles. So that I could get 2 blue to cast an Oracle through a Blood Moon and a Chalice. And like one of the cool things, I even did it at Eternal Weekend against a Mystic Forge player, where I just went like Dark Ritual, Spirit Guide, that makes 6 mana. I slammed the Spy, and then I think he had a Vexing Bauble in play, and he used a Fairy Macabre. And I was like, okay, he took the Dread Return and 1 Oracle. I still had 3 other Oracles in the yard and both Lanterns. So I just converted the black and green mana to blue and just cast the Oracle from hand.
Awesome.
And it's like when you can do stuff like that, it's almost impossible to, to beat.
I think I've already told Nathan this, so maybe our listeners will hear this for the second time. But when I played at our Friday Night Magic last Friday, I went against Naya Maverick, and it was like they had a deafening silence on the battlefield, had a surgical in hand and a fairy macabre in hand, and also Gadok Teague on the board. And I managed to win, and then a Pyroblast in hand. And I managed to win through all this with a hardcast Oracle, because I slammed Jack-O-Lantern turn 1 and just kept it in play, and it was like I Undercity inform Zack, and I proceed to mill myself, and they tried to surgical my oracles. So I used the first part of Jack-O-Lantern to exile my own fastest oracle. And in response to don't try to draw trigger, I memories journeyed 3 cards on top. And one of that had, it was I think it was, not Petal. It was Spirit Guide. So that I, even if they Fairy Macabre both Spirit Guides, which they did, I was able to draw the last Spirit Guide, exile Spirit Guide for green, tap the last remaining blue mana, filtered into blue mana from Jack-O-Lantern, and slammed the Oracle from hand. That was such
That's what I mean. It's so
insane
technical. Yeah. And that's the advantage of you knowing your deck inside and out, and the opponent not knowing how technical oops can be.
Yeah, basically.
And that's such a huge advantage.
Yeah, basically what they said was, if they didn't surgical at first, so they could have won it, because the deafening silence turned off their Pyroblast in hand. So that was such a great anecdote right here. But speaking of more Thassa's oracles, that's in my opinion the biggest revelation in the sideboard. The 3 Thassa's oracle are so good. Why are they so great?
Well, I think they pull double duty, so they can beat the permanent graveyard hate, but also graveyard hate from hand, like Fairy Macabres and things like that. And I think that's part of the failings of Green-Black, is that, you have Force of Vigor, that's great, Foundation Breaker, but they only solve one problem, and that's stuff that's on the board. And it also doesn't stop creatures. So when you're able to cast the Oracle from hand, you can beat almost anything, short of like an Endurance. And I just think that that's such a huge advantage now. And that you almost become like an Oracle Shift deck in a sense. Or like, was it Inverter of Truth? Is that the Pioneer?
I think so. It was Inverter of Truth, yeah.
Yeah. So you basically become a deck like that. And I thought that was so cool. Because initially I was scrambling to find something to replace that Force of Vigor effect in blue. So I was like, hey, well, why not just try casting Oracle from hand? And I start out a lot of my testing like that, where I just kind of throw stuff at the wall and see what works. And then it does, and I'm impressed by it, and I kind of continue and spread the word. Reanimate was the same way. Back in the day, we were struggling versus blue decks, and I wanted an extra card in the main deck that kind of helped versus Force of Wills and things like that. So I just threw 1 Reanimate in there, not even considering like how it works with Memory's Journey or anything like that. and it was just so good. And then it worked with the journey piles, and it was a way to play around other hate cards. So like Oracle kind of worked in the same sense, where I was just beating so much. I'm like, this is insane. Why would you not want to run it? And then everybody asked me, like, why are there 3 oracles in the sideboard? I'm like, to cast them.
I also was like, was the same. It was like 3 oracles in the sideboard. I don't get it. But yeah, after playing sometimes, and when I first resolved my hardcast oracle from hand, it was like, poof, mind blown. I could do this all the time.
Yeah. I mean, like, even, like, say, like, one of the advantages too is people will aggressively mulligan. So like if they aggressively mulligan to a Leyline of the Void, they don't really have much else of a threat. So you have all day to kind of play around. So you could just like slam an Undercity Informer on a turn 2 or a turn 3, pass the turn, untap, then play Oracle from hand. You know, trigger goes on the stack, you sacrifice the Oracle to the Informer and mill yourself. Like, things like that are just so commonplace and simple and straightforward, because a lot of people will pretend like you have to get to 6 mana to do it, and that's just not the case. And even if it was the case, a Foundation Breaker line is 6 mana, so it's no different. It's the same amount of cards, same mana usage, so it's really not that far off or like something crazy that's impossible.
Yeah, you have pretty high chances of drawing one of your oracles. I mean, if you're playing 4 of them, it's very likely that you end up with one in your hand.
Yeah, and you also have 3 bounce spells, 3 to 4 bounce spells. So it's not like you're only relying on the oracles, and you have the Sink into Stupor main deck as well. So it's like a pretty high rate to have a Spire Informer plus an answer to Graveyard Hate.
Or just an answer to Force of Will. I mean, Sink into Stupor doubles as an answer to Force if you have enough mana.
And the best part is that now that we're in blue-black, you can actually pay for a pack
yeah,
trigger.
Which
I have done.
Yeah, that's true, and that's also one of my biggest gripes with green-black, that paying for pacts is, almost never really doable. It's like, even with Summoner's Pact, you use so much resources to pay for your Summoner's Pact. If you can't win on the same turn, that you simply can't get into the game anymore. That happened a lot to me.
And the other benefit too is you can cast the Narcomoebas. So Narcomoeba's not a dead card in hand, so you can do things. I've beaten a lot of blue decks by turn 1 Cabal Therapy, named Force of Will. Turn 2 cast Narcomoeba from hand, flashback Cabal Therapy. So like you can get more mileage out of your therapies and out of your Narcomoebas. Everything is pretty much castable now in the deck in the blue-black version.
Yeah, and hardcast Narcomoebas are nothing to scoff at, really, because they killed a lot of opponents already.
I mean, even on attacking lines where you're doing damage and stuff, it adds up. You could even do like turn 2 Narcomoeba into turn 3 Boggart Trawler, and that's 4 damage every turn. That's a clock.
And you're already presenting the combo line always. It's like, deal with these 4 damage on board or die to the combo. Speaking of the other sideboard cards, I think Echoing Truth is pretty self-explanatory, and we also talked about discard, like Duress right now. So there are, 5 to 6 slots that are pretty open. And I actually don't know what to do with them. They are, there's so many options like Disruptor Flute, Force of Will, Stifle, Consign to Memory, or you're playing Leyline of the Void also in the deck. So there are so many choices for the sideboard that don't really come up a lot.
Yeah, so I don't know. Nathan gives me crap a lot because I play things like Graveyard Hate, and he's like, it's 5% of the meta. Why would you even bother sideboarding for it? And I'm always like, look, the main deck and 6 sideboard cards can fight the other 95% of the meta. So why wouldn't you just throw extra cards in to get a little percentage on the matchups that you would run into that you could possibly lose? So like, I like the Hello Newton strategy of, no sacred cows. The deck kind of shifts with the meta. If you look at Newton's list, he's never running the same 75 all the time. It's always changing. And my lists are kind of the same as far as the sideboard goes, where it kind of just flows with the meta. And as much as Oops is like a straight up combo, it's also like a psychological game where you tend to learn your opponent's habits and how they play and how they react, and then you look at what cards they bring in or what becomes the norm in the meta. So I kind of shift between what I want to fight. And like even looking at this list now, like the duress, I like duress versus blue decks. It lets you slow down a little bit and kind of pick apart their hands. I've been kind of bouncing between that and unmask. I don't like pitch cards very much because we mulligan so aggressively, but unmask kind of pulls the double duty where it can hit a macabre, it can hit, a counter spell, things like that. The Echoing Truth, I like Echoing Truth because it can hit multiple ley lines. Because if you play into the Floodmaw and your opponent opens up on 2 ley lines, like you're just going to be pissed off. Yeah. So I prefer being able to hit multiple ley lines. And it wasn't relevant in the previous meta, but in this meta, Chalice of the Void has come back. So people are going to Chalice on 1U all the time. So a 2-mana bounce spell just functions better.
Also, sometimes you see double Doffy on your opponent's side.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate plan to just double Doffy and hit you in the face, and then you hit them with Echoing Truth. It's just like, yeah, I have it.
And I like the bounce better than Force of Vigor for that same reason. It's like you can hit a Dothy, you can hit a ley line, it doesn't matter. The Oracles we previously talked about. And then from there, I'd say, like you said, there's about 6 empty slots that you can kind of choose whatever you want. And most commonly, I do like Leyline of the Void and like a Disruptor Flute. Because I feel like Disruptor Flute is like a safety card for me. It just makes me feel better. I don't ever side it in, but I feel comfortable knowing it's there. It's like a good anti-combo card. It can kind of hit anything. I'm considering it again because if people are going to stick to blue-black tempo, it plays the role of being able to shut off Nile Spellbomb. And if you don't see a Nile Spellbomb, you can name cards like Force of Will or Daze or things like that and put a tax on those cards. So I really like the flexibility there that it can shut down their Graveyard Hate or their spells.
I'm a true believer for Disruptive Flute, at least since my last match at Eternal Week in Europe, where I faced Doomsday, and they built their pile and they tried to go off and crack the LED. and Cycle Street Wave, crack LED. And it was like, well, now or never. And I just kept the hand because of one Thoughtcast, where they have shown me Doomsday, Dark Ritual, Force of Negation, Ponder, and a Petal, I think, something like that. And I thought to myself, if I take the Doomsday, I'm playing not to lose. If I take the Force of Negation, I'm playing to win. Because I don't think they expect Disruptor Flute. And then they went into making the Doomsday pile. Then playing LED or was like, playing Brainstorm, Ponder, playing LED, Street Raving, cracking LED in response, and then having 3 cards in the library. It was like, now just Disruptor Flute, naming Fus's Oracle, and they were totally taken aghast by this. I was like, I didn't expect that card out of that deck. And the remaining pile was Oracle, Land, Oracle. So they thought about Force of Will from my side, they thought about Balustrade Spy when I have the Force of Will, so I can't mill them out. But they didn't expect Disruptor Flute. This was such a great moment for me. So.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I had a surprise play at Eternal Weekend because I liked bringing in Disruptor Flute against Painter because it was kind of a stand-in for Stifle because we were playing Stifle at the time, but I switched over to Disruptor Flute for Eternal Weekend. And I had flashed it in on their, I believe they had a Spell Bomb. So I flashed it in at the end of their turn, named their Spell Bomb, untapped, and then milled myself, and they had a Goblin Welder in play, and they welded my Disruptor Flute out of play and switched it with a Petal from the graveyard. And I had not thought of that play at all. I had never considered it. But they had Red Blast in hand, so they were ready for the Memories Journey. And as I picked up my deck to go through it to look for the Memories Journey to see what I wanted to do, I stumbled over the Ancient Grudge. And in response, I Ancient Grudged their Spell Bomb with the trigger on the stack and ended up winning that way. Which all turned out to be irrelevant because I had Oracle in hand anyway. So
that's the great Oracle in hand.
Yeah, so if they had Red Blasted the Memories Journey, I could have just slammed the Oracle and won either way. But I'd never considered that line, that they could switch out my Disruptor Flute. But it's just so strong in the combo matchups because you can name anything. That I just like having it as a safety valve. It makes me feel better about myself. I don't know.
Yeah, so basically the Disruptor Flute is also the Stifle slot. Well, what is Stifle for?
Yes. Stifle I liked for like Green-White Depths, lands, those kinds of, and Painter, because Painter, all of their artifact hate are activated abilities. And they also were running Fairy Macabre. So you can be all of their activated abilities or a Fairy Macabre from hand. Same with like Green-White Depths, Cradle Control. You can stifle a Bajukabog trigger. You can stifle an Endurance trigger. Stifle a Fairy Macabre. I mean, that's the key, is that all of those decks were moving away from Leyline of the Void. And all of their graveyard hate became triggered abilities. So Stifle just came up huge.
And why choose Stifle over Consign?
Because I feel like an idiot, because I only learned this through playing.
Okay.
Is that Consign to Memory. I tried to use Consign to Memory on an opponent's Undercity Informer, and learned that it didn't work because it's an activated ability, not a triggered ability. So, for all the reasons I just mentioned, all the artifact hate are activated abilities. so consign does not hit them. And it also makes me feel even more dumb because I had played so many blue matches where I didn't play an Undercity Informer because I knew they had a consigned memory in hand. So I felt like a big dum-dum.
A lot of blue opponents are feeling pretty confident with double consign in their hand. And then they simply lose to Undercity Informer because they don't think about the possibility of the two Cabal Therapies in your yard. Or when you flip the yard and when you flip the deck. And then, yeah, the Narcomoebas resolve. Or sometimes they even consign the Narcomoeba triggers. And it's like, well, okay, I have one spy, Cabal Therapy, you get 2 Poxwalkers. Game over.
Yeah, and that brings us to the other big upgrade is the Poxwalkers have been huge. It just adds so much more dynamic play to the game to have the Poxwalkers. I like to run 2, and that's really just for building combat lines. I think 2 is like a good minimum amount so that you can just build up a big board state. I've had a lot of games where I've gotten to 18 to 20 power on board and just won by attacking the following turn. Whereas before you were kind of stuck where you had to attack all 3 turns to win because you couldn't really create that much power or like get through blockers or those kinds of things.
If you're doing combat lines, you have to use Memory's Journey also to simply, don't die to a draw, to the can't draw. What does this Memory Journey piles look like? Because I'm always a little bit, I don't want to say struggling, but I don't feel it really matters. So I most of the time simply put in discard, or discard land, discard, or something like that.
I think my preference is usually to build journey piles that get the most amount of creatures on the board. So I'll usually put a Reanimate in the pile, and then any kind of mana, or if I have the mana, more creatures. Because sometimes you have creatures in hand, so you just want mana. So it's just trying to commit as much to the board as possible. If they're like a combo deck, then I'll do discard. Another trick that I like to do is exile my own graveyard.
Okay.
So I've been putting a lot of preference onto Boggart Trawlers to get them into play. Because you have decks like Painter with Agatha's Soul Cauldron and Blue-Black Reanimator. Any deck with the Reanimate, really. If you make a Journey pile, they can just reanimate your Spy. Soul Cauldron can copy Informer's ability, so they can mill you. So I really like to remove my graveyard from the situation. So if I have Dread Return available, I'll Dread Return a Boggart. Not only because it's the highest powered card left in the deck, at 3/1, but also it can exile my graveyard and remove that possibility from the opponent.
I gotta admit it was just a level up moment for me because I haven't thought about the possibility of removing your own graveyard to get yourself more secure in the win. It's awesome. I think also your opponent pretty much doesn't see that coming, and I think we're the only graveyard deck who wants a graveyard exiled after comboing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's part of the joy of knowing your deck more than the opponent knows your deck. And at this point, I've been playing nonstop for maybe like 4 years with Oops, and everything is muscle memory. So I'll mill the deck, and then the opponent will pause and think, and then I already have like 4 lines in my head of like where I want to go, and it's just like a choose your own adventure. Like, show me what path you took, and then I'll auto fill in the rest from my end because I already know like where I want to go from that point.
Awesome. So just one question before we close this chapter. What are the weaknesses of oops, or specifically blue-black oops?
The biggest weaknesses for blue-black are Blood Moon, because we lose out on the value of Summoner's Pact for Wild Cantor. So you lose that edge. It's part of the reason why I went up to 2 Jack-o'-lanterns, not only for all the technical play we listed before, but I wanted another thing that could be played to get through Blood Moon. And even a Chalice. That's the other thing too, is like a Chalice on 0 plus a Blood Moon, or a Vexing Bauble plus a Blood Moon. A Jack-o'-lantern can win through that. And I actually did get a Game 3 win versus Moonstompy at Eternal Weekend by top decking Jack-o'-lantern, because they had a Blood Moon and a Vexing Bauble. So that shuts off Lotus Petal and it shuts off my land. So the literal only out is the Jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Blood Moons are really tough, because at that point you only have 6 outs. You have Lotus Petals and you have Jack-o'-lantern. And if they have Chalice on 0, then you're really, locked out. The other thing that's tough is Red Blasts, because most of the sideboard answers to permanent hate, or really any hate, between Oracle and Echoing Truth, they're blue. So it's hard to fight through Red Blast sometimes.
I can see this, yeah. Then Pyroblast and Red Blast is pretty much basically every sideboard right now. Or in every sideboard that plays red.
And then the only other weakness is other turn 1 combo decks.
Mm-hmm. That's why the free Leyline of the Void are.
Yeah. So Leyline's great. So like you can get, turn 1 by Black Red Reanimator. You can get turn 1 by Oops. It's not the best in that matchup because they can just mill you, and if you don't have a Spirit Guide, like, you lose. But I really like Leyline of the Void against all of the Echo of Aeons decks that pop up. Because most of the Storm decks these days go through the graveyard. And they definitely don't see Leyline of the Void coming. Because they'll mulligan aggressively to an LED Echo hand. And then they just get stuffed when you slam a Leyline down. And then you kind of have all day to, get your feet under you.
Oh yeah, sounds like an awesome plan. So, So sounds great. I'm also a true believer of blue-black oops. I wasn't sure at first, but after I think 15 to 20 matches, it was pretty clear for me that this is the version that I'm feeling most confident right now.
Yeah. It feels really dumb to say, but you feel like you get to play more Magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Whereas green-black is kind of like just like a one-shot. Like you either get there or you don't. There's not as much nuance to it. Whereas this version, I think you get to play a little more. If your Informer gets countered, you play another one, and you just keep going and going. And there's more technical play from the graveyard once you mill. I like it a lot more. It feels more stable.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And because this is your baby, this is your love child, let's talk a little bit about your kind of deck building philosophy. Because you and Nathan are the two, for me, the two masterminds of Oops. So, and you have so totally different deck building philosophies. We had already Nathan on the cast. He's more the technical guy. He's the Excel sheets guy. He puts everything into Excel sheets and percentages with the hand calculator, and draws basically every decision he makes with deck building revolves around data. you said beforehand, you're throwing everything on the wall and just see what sticks. So,
Yeah.
how does the deck building philosophy really looks like on your side?
Yeah, I think this is something I battle in the Discord with a lot. Is I always say that it's all vibes, because I mean math is great and everything, but it's probability. It's not a guarantee, you know. I try to steer people away from thinking that you just have to turn one all the time, and that it takes more to navigate to a victory than just think that you're going to slam spy every time and it's going to work. So that's why I really don't care about turn one percentages, because, you could have 30% to turn one, but like how many of those are protected? How many of those do the opponents have answers? Like it brings your numbers way down. And the way that I like to craft the deck and build is kind of like slamming my head against the wall. I don't consider myself a very strong player in the sense, you know how you have like certain players who just pick up decks and they win, and they just intuitively know.
I know these kind of players.
They just intuitively win. I don't get it. So for me, it's practice. I get in leagues, I grind leagues, I lose a bunch, I see what works, what doesn't work. I try to figure out where the holes are in the meta and kind of attack, or even just from my own personal play style. That's something that I push for a lot with Oops players, is kind of tune the deck in a way that works to your play style, and then go from there. But I experiment with a lot of cards, and sometimes they just don't work at all, and sometimes you get pleasantly surprised. But it's all based off of just grinding.
So, like you said,
that's
it's
why
all vibes.
I tend to ignore the math. Yeah, it's definitely vibes for sure. I don't want to act like anything is guaranteed in the deck, and you kind of have to fight to win. So you need to figure out those avenues to get there, and that's through trial and error.
Yeah, like you said, there are no sacred cows.
Yeah. It's the Newton strategy.
Yeah, I actually like that approach, that there are no sacred cows, because some things get power crept out of the format, and sometimes just power creeps hits the format, and you need to really wrap your mind around a card that you probably never have thought about.
And I think a good example of that is Force of Will. A lot of the players playing blue-black like to put Force of Will in, and I think Force of Will is like a legacy sacred cow, right? They see a blue deck, they're like, I want to put Force in there. And I think Force is a perfectly good option. I think it's a strong card, but it doesn't work for me personally. I think that Force of Will causes me to play more poorly. It causes me to sideboard more poorly, because I tend to think like, oh, this could hit anything. This could Force of Will anything. And it really never works like that. So I like to go a little slower, use discard, and kind of pick away at the opponent and not really rely on Force of Will. If I was going to play Force of Will, it would only be to bring in versus combo decks. Mm-hmm. So if that's the only reason I'm bringing it in, then I don't think it's as strong for my play style.
Yeah, because the most combo decks are geared versus Force of Will. They simply can beat it with the main deck already.
And then my other main strategy to how I play, and I kind of brought it up in the Discord last night, is I don't like playing defense. I want to be as aggressive as possible. I want to put people on the back foot and just commit to stopping their hate cards. So the sideboard should really be geared towards just trying to stop what the opponent is stopping you with. And I think that plays into the psychology of playing an Oops deck, is that I think people are inherently nervous because they think they're going to get turn one. So they play a little more poorly. They aggressively mulligan. have worse hands. Yeah. And I think, you can't discount the psychological impact that a turn one combo deck has on people, because they'll be nervous. And I just, I don't want the Mike Tyson quote, like everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little cheesy, but like, I like that mentality. I like being like, punching people in the face. Like, that's how you're playing the deck. And you're just being as aggressive as possible and just committing.
I love it. So, with the deck building philosophy out of the way, why should someone choose blue-black over green-black? I think we already tackled this a little bit in this episode. So, just in some few short sentences, what's the advantages directly over green-black?
Yeah, I think it's just more stable. I think you can play more Magic, and I think you can play more technical Magic. And I think you have more chances to do a lot of things. And being in blue, you can cast every card in the deck, and I think that that's a really strong advantage.
Mm-hmm. Everything's castable is great. Also with the Jack-o'-lanterns, sometimes you can simply splash, like we did with Ancient Grudge, splash another color into the deck that's castable from the graveyard. We go over now to the last topic of today, and that's the future of Oops. Because Oops is right now pretty much an open field after the bannings. So there are green-black, blue-black. You already mentioned it. There's a mono-black version right now, and there are just so many things, so many directions this deck can now take. What do you think will the future for Oops look like?
Well, I love the mono black version, the main deck. I just think that it's so strong that you always have access to black lands, and Unmask in a mono black deck is just so powerful. And I have it in the main deck, so you have 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Unmask, 4 Pact of Negation, all main deck. And the purpose of that is, it's basically how I would sideboard for a blue matchup. So the deck is pre-boarded for blue, and it also picks off a lot of the rest of the meta. So you don't even have to sideboard half the time. I'd say like 80% of your games, you're not even sideboarding, and the deck functions perfectly good. But it's more of a brute force approach where you're just like slamming the combo. You're being super aggressive. You're going fast as possible. It's a lot like the green-black versions where you're just like all in. Where you lose out is on the technical play, the Oracle piles, those kinds of things. That's where where it's not as good as blue-black, I would say. And then the sideboard is just, it's so hard to fight Leyline of the Void or artifacts in mono black. So that's why there's like 8 dedicated answers, and even splashing green for Nature's Claim.
Yeah, that you can only cast with Spirit Guides or with Petals. So you have 8 sources of green. That's not a lot, actually. Yeah.
Well, as long as there's not a Leyline of the Void, you can mill yourself and get green off of Jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah, I think that works. Mm-hmm. With against Craftdigger's Cage. That should be enough. But then you only play 1 Jack-o'-lantern in this list. So then there is no... Then you aren't able to Memory's Journey anymore.
Yeah, and that's where you lose out on the technical aspects of things. Where, if that's your plan, then you're just committed to destroying the graveyard hate, and then whatever happens, happens. It's just so strong. It bulldozes through the meta. It's had such a high success rate for me. You feel like you're printing out 4 ones and, losing a random one here and there.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. So just brute forcing with mono black. Also, there's some talk about Yeah, because Oops is pretty much the best card against Oops is Grafdigger's Cage, and people are already trying to beat it. So, what are the ways to beat Grafdigger's Cage besides maybe Nature's Claim or Bounce? Is there anything that we could do, or anything that Oops could do to win through a cage?
I mean, this is something that I've been struggling with. Some people have been bringing up in the Discord like a shenanigans line.
Okay, yeah.
So you put in like a Progenitus, because you can pitch that to unmask. So you could have Progenitus and shenanigans, and then you mill yourself, Progenitus goes on top, you go to the next turn, you dredge the Progenitus, shenanigans goes to your hand, and then you can destroy the cage. I think that's a little too cute. I just with the blue-black version, you don't really care about cage because you can play around it. You have Stink into Stupor in the main deck. Like, even against blue decks, you could mill yourself, use double Jack-o'-lantern for double blue to cast Sink into Stupor, bounce the cage, that kind of thing. But in mono black, and really just against blue decks in general, I just ignore cage. If they have a turn one cage, and I'm feeling lazy, I'll just scoop and go to game 3. Or if I really want to try, I'll just commit to combo or creature line. So against decks like Sneak and Show plays a decent amount of cages. You can just start playing creatures. You can play your Poxwalkers from hand. You can play Bog Trawler, and you can win a lot of games just through combat. And now that Psychic Frog is gone, the combat lines are so much more available.
Yeah, they're so much better.
Yeah, because you couldn't get through a Psychic Frog at all. But now that that's gone, you can fight through other creatures. Or like trade off and play more. But you weren't trading with a Psychic Frog.
Nah, because they were just pitching all the cards to it, and it just grew exponentially. It was just too huge of a beater, and then they drew into their cards and into more hate and into removal, and that's why you played 4 Poxwalkers in Eternal Weekend.
That was for
Spellbomb and Psychic Frog.
That was for UB Tempo. So I had 2 Poxwalkers in the sideboard, and the reasoning is I don't know if it's just my luck, but blue players always have turn 1 cage or turn 1 Spellbomb every time without fail. So they tend to do that, and then they don't have counter magic to back it up because they think that'll lock the game out. So if they turn 1 Spellbomb, and then I turn 1 combo, and then Journey in response to the Spellbomb, then I could put 4 Poxwalkers in play and have 12 power, and then make a Journey pile for Oracle. So now they have to fight me on 2 fronts.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas not only do they have to stop the Oracle line, but now they got to stop 12 power worth of attackers that's coming at them for 3 turns.
That's such a great line, actually.
Yeah, it worked in practice. I've had it successfully happen a few times, but it just didn't come up enough times for it to be relevant. And at Eternal Weekend, I didn't face a single UB Tempo deck, which is crazy. I was trying to tech for the meta, and I didn't run into a single one.
Yeah, me too. I ran into one blue-black mid-range that went a little bit bigger, but they didn't run any spell bombs in the sideboard. So it didn't came up for me either. Although I played the same list at EV Prague. But yeah, I would have loved to kill my opponent for Poxwalkers, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think this is a point I wanted to bring up too, is that we tend to dismiss like the Chowton list, the green-black that he's been winning with. Because if you look at it, it really is suboptimal with a lot of the choices. And like, I'm not here to like shit on the deck list or anything like that. I feel that it is suboptimally built, but it's winning. So you have to be able to look at that from a perspective and be like, even if this deck isn't like maxed out to its potential, it's still winning. So why? How is it winning? What is it doing differently? And then you can kind of use those concepts and look at the meta and see how you can navigate things better. So whereas you might not copy their list, you can still use it as inspiration to kind of tune your own list to be a little more successful in the meta.
What do you think about Charbel?
I really don't like it. I'm not gonna like hate on it completely. In mono black, you don't really have a choice. But I think that there's so many things that hate it out incidentally that it makes it not successful. Where people will bring in their artifact hate anyways, just because they think it'll shut down your Lotus Petal. Like, Lotus Petal is the only artifact besides Jack-o'-lantern, but people still bring them in like it's going to shut the deck down. So you'll run into like collector oofs. Disruptor Flute is all over the place. And it's all the decks that you would want to bring Belcher in against that have the things that incidentally shut down Belcher too. So unless you're like slamming Belcher and going off in the same turn, it's a lot less successful than you would think it would be. So I'm not really a big fan. I was playing it in mono black because like, what other options do you really have? But I wasn't even really impressed with it in
And what do you think about the Lothleft Giant in Shuten's list?
It's irrelevant. It could literally just be another Oracle. In the mono black version I was testing out recently, I had 2 Dread Returns and 2 Oracles. And that's because Fairy Macabre can't beat 3 copies of each. Because like in the Chowton list, you know, he's got 1 extra Dread Return, 1 extra Lothleft Giant. And it's like, well, you know, they could just target both Dread Returns. Yeah. So really, what's the advantage there?
Yeah, probably they are going more over the Reanimate line. Memory's Journey for Reanimate, probably.
The only bonus to having that extra target is that they can't take your Dread Return and your Memory's Journey if you don't have the mana available. Because sometimes you have to pass the turn, so you need that Journey to sit in the yard an extra turn. So they can get you if they target Dread Return and Memory's Journey. So the extra Dread Return means they have to take both. So that's like the only advantage, but that's so corner case that I don't think it's worth dedicating. But I like having 2 copies of each in the sideboard. So then if you have 3 main deck, you have the 3 Dread Return, 3 Oracles. You can mulligan more aggressively versus a Fairy Macabre deck. And, you know, God forbid you're able to just produce 4 mana and a spy and nothing else, you know, no journey lines or anything like that. You're still safe.
Still safe against Fairy Macabre, yeah. And Surgical isn't really that played anymore.
But even that doesn't come up that much.
Yeah.
So I'm already kind of thinking about moving away from that because it's not happening as much as I would like it to.
Yeah, maybe Shenanigans Progenitors is what you will put in.
I'm really thinking about maybe trying Chancellors again.
Chancellors, also versus
and that could be
versus blue.
Something they can stop. Yeah, they can stop a turn 1 cage potentially. They're things to try. I'm not saying it's great. I don't have high hopes for it, but you try it out and you see what works and you go from there.
Actually, I am going to try Shenanigans Progenitors this tomorrow. Because just really for the cool. Just for the lols actually.
Yeah, I mean it's creative. I like it, and if you have access to red mana, it's potentially infinite. because, you know, every time you dredge that progenitus, it goes back on top of the library. So if you can play shenanigans every turn, like if you had a red land or something, then every turn you play it, it goes to the graveyard, and then you put the progenitus back up again. So, you know, you could attack infinitely.
Would be an idea for the future. Maybe some kind of oops list will branch into it. We will see. Yeah, Patrick, it was a pleasure to have you on. Such great personality. Thank you. It was really great to have you here for the deep talk about oops all spells. And I hope our listeners are really considering playing this deck or taking it a little bit more seriously.
And I have to clarify, the 76th card is Memory's Journey.
The 61. 76, yeah. Yeah, it's Memory's Journey, yeah.
Yeah, so the 61st card is Memory's Journey.
Never cut.
Always has been, always will be.
Yeah, never cut Memory's Journey. It's the best card of the deck.
People always ask, why are there 61 cards? And it's because I wanted to add Memory's Journey and I couldn't find space for it. So I just threw it in as the 61st card because you never want to draw it. So you just pretend like it's not in the deck.
So awesome.
So just so everyone knows, it's Memory's Journey.
So putting the word out right here. Patrick, if people want to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
I am on Blue Sky and in the Discord, Oops All Spells Discord. We're really active. We respond to any questions. We're really helpful. We want everyone to kind of start from the same knowledge base that we have. And I think that's important that for the deck to grow and evolve, that we shouldn't gatekeep any of the information. And it's only going to help us get better. So any new ideas, any input, we welcome everybody.
So join the Oops All Spells Discord and follow Patrick on Blue Sky. If you like the podcast series and if you like what we are doing, follow us on social media. It's @response_legacy. You can find me on social media. It's @FinniganTG on Twitter and basically everywhere else. Yeah. And with this, thanks for watching. Thank you very much, Patrick. It was nice to have you.
This was In Response, a Legacy podcast. If you enjoyed the ride, feel free to support the show by following, leaving a review, or subscribe on patreon.com/response_legacy.